Hi, I'm Dr. Jason J. Campbell, and I want to thank you for taking the time to watch my videos. This video marks the beginning of the first day of filming for this new series that I'm going to do on semiotics. And prior to this video, I had a question that I posed to my community of viewers. And basically, the question was composed of two parts. The first part of the question was, what is the semiological status of the signal inconceivable? And the second part was, what's the semiological status of the signification ineffable? And it was a very technical response, but the reason why I did it is because, one, I wanted to see what people think, and there was one comment that was pretty close to the answer. I forget who who gave the response, but my whole point of asking the question to the community regarding semiology was I wanted to know how deep I should take the lecture. As I said in the video, I was going to do my dissertation on linguistics. Specifically, I was going to do sort of a semiological account of hate speech. I do genocide, so I was going to do hate speech and cult speech, and how is that speech different from regular speech, and what is it about that speech that's unique to sort of cult and hate speech and sort of mass hysteria and stuff. And do a semiological account of hate speech in general, and I still might do that. But, you know, in investigating hate speech a lot, I started to get interested in the people who do the best hate speech, and that led to genocide and Holocaust and stuff, and now that's what I'm doing. So that's how I sort of, the quick version of how I got to genocide studies and conflict resolution. With respect to this lecture that I'm going to be giving you guys, I am going to actually give the community what they want. You know, I had a few responses, and basically everybody was like, take it deep. So I'm going to take the lecture deep on semiology. I browsed through the various videos on YouTube, and there were fairly good videos on semiotics. There were a few really good ones, but nothing really in depth, nothing to the level that I'll be doing now. And as I said, I have 16 pages worth of notes. I finally finished compiling the notes. If you want to follow along, please click the link in the banner that will pop up, or the link in the description field. It'll take you to the PDF. Download the PDF and follow along. I definitely recommend following along with the PDF for this lecture series, because there's so many images and graphs because of the nature of, you know, symbolism and so on. Another point is I decided to keep the lecture on specific to, as I said I would, to Locke, Saussure, and Lacan. I intentionally did not incorporate Peirce in the discussion, not because I don't like Peirce's account, only because, you know, it would take me another maybe 3 or 4 days to shoot. I anticipate this video is going to take me maybe, you know, at least 5 to 7 days to finish shooting, and today's day 1. So I didn't incorporate Peirce for that reason. Another reason I didn't incorporate Peirce is because a lot of Peirce's account of icons and such have been sort of absorbed and incorporated in advertisement and sort of marketing. And I definitely want to stray away from that. The hardcore sort of epistemological conceptions of the function of semiotics, and also the Lacanian sort of psychoanalytic account, is what really intrigued me. With that being said, a little disclaimer, and then I'll jump into the lecture. The only disclaimer is I'm not a psychoanalyst. I haven't formally studied psychology in any sense. You know, as an undergraduate, I took the general intro to, you know, psychology, and I soon forgot all of that stuff. It wasn't until much later in my academic career as a graduate student that I returned to sort of psychoanalysis through Lacan. Specifically Lacan's discussion in semiotics. So I'm not going to go into a huge psychological account because, as I said, I'm not a psychologist. However, Lacan's account of semiotics is important because it'll help us understand sort of this reversal that he does between the signal and the signifier. I'm not going to jump into that. The signal as the signifier, and I'll get into that later. So with that being said, I'm going to give you what you want and give you the abyss. So let's begin. So this is, it's titled Saussure, Lacan, Saussure, Locke, and Lacan, Semiotics, Semiology, and the Evolving Linguistic Community. What you're going to see in the discussion is that this concept of the linguistic community is essential for an account of semiology, all too sort of overlooked. And I'll talk about the importance and significance of the linguistic community in a bit. Okay, so I'll just put semiotics. Intro to semiotics, and this is section 1. Alright, so the first thing to recognize is that I'm doing a very particular type of semiotics in this series. The type that I'm doing is what's known as anthroposemiotics. Anthroposemiotics. There's variations of anthroposemiotics, and there are different types of forms of semiotics. But the type that I'm going to be doing specifically throughout these series of videos over the next several hours will be anthroposemiotics. And basically that is defined as the capacity for human beings to understand signs, right? And this comes from Saussure's canonical text, Course in General Linguistics, right? It's important to understand that, and I'm not going to give the historical account because I never give the historical account, I just jump into the lecture, but the one bit of historical account that I will give is that the Course in General Linguistics, and I have the book somewhere, this book here, Course in General Linguistics, written by Ferdinand de Saussure. First of all, it's an amazing text. It's, anyone interested in semiology, semiotics, you really need to read it. And also just a quick point of reference, because I know some of you are really nerdy. I'm going to be using semiology and semiotics interchangeably. I do recognize that semiology is sort of Saussure's conception, and semiotics is more sort of Peirce's conception, but I'm going to be using semiotics and semiology interchangeably. I'm not going to make a distinction. And I understand that there is a distinction to be made, but I'm not going to make a distinction. So, back to what I was saying. So, in the Course in General Linguistics, it wasn't written by Saussure. It was compiled by his diligent students. I only hope that my lectures are good enough that my students, after I die, write a book. But who knows. It was written by students Charles Bally and Albert, I think his name is pronounced Sakai. I don't know how to pronounce it. But it's in the notes. So those two students wrote the text. So it wasn't Saussure who wrote the text directly, but it was two of his students that contributed, two linguists that contributed, and I gave their names in case you want to Google them. Alright, so let's jump into the analysis. 3 phases of linguistics. So what are those? 3 phases of linguistics. Alright, so the first phase of linguistics is grammar. Grammar. The first phase is grammar, and grammar, sort of the structure in which the rules are applied to language, so that, we have a proper mode of speaking, a proper mode of writing. This is obviously going to be based in logic, right? And you can see why semiotics and logic sort of go hand in hand. In my investigation, as I sort of progressed through symbolic logic to modal logic to epistemic modal to non-monotonic logic and on, artificial intelligence logic, as I sort of progressed through my logical training, I recognized that the structure and the rules, particularly the rules of inference that you're given right from the beginning, I think there are 19 or so rules of inference that you're given right from the beginning, are used to structure how the logical formulas are to be understood, right? So if I wanted to know, let's say I'm going through a deduction, and on one line I see a state of affairs, and another line I see a state of affairs, and I've done very in-depth logic lectures, I know that I can apply those rules to deduce my conclusion. It's the same thing linguistically, right? In language, and I'm not going to get into the grammar, but in language, our language proceeds, our grammar is used to structure the language. What we'll see later is sort of a return to this very sort of rudimentary concept of grammar, and I'll make it a lot more complicated. I'll complicate it a little bit more, just to make it a little bit more intriguing. But the first thing to recognize, just on a very general introductory account, we're just getting warm, is that grammar is based on logic.